So when you're starting out from scratch, the first thing you want to do is set up the 3D family and give it a name. So we're going to do new. You want to figure out what kind of template you want to pick. When you go down to lighting, you'll have the option of doing something that's ceiling or wall based. Never use ceiling or wall based. If you want to use face based, you can. And it might be difficult at some times to find the right template. You can always use generic model and change the category afterwards if you find the templates limiting. Again, you'll see that lighting fixture does not have a face-based option. So your options are just free or a generic model and then changing after. Or if you want to make a face-based option, you can use generic model face-based to make your fixture and change the family type once you open the template. I'm going to start with generic model and I'll show you how to do that. In the family category and parameters, you'll see that this is under generic models. This is a very frustrating category when you're working in project world and you're trying to turn things off. I would discourage use of this category on pretty much everything unless it cannot fit in anything else, just because it's difficult to figure out what something is when you're turning them off. So this is how you change to lighting fixtures. You'll also notice when we scroll down that the host is listed as nothing. In other words, it is not hosted. Next, we want to think about the shared parameters we want in here. You'll probably want to jump into making the 3D content first. However, 3D content is the easiest part. All the other components that make Revit really smart and beneficial are the other things besides the 3D content, the information that you have embedded in it. So first, let's load all of our shared parameters. A parent load is already a parameter that is pre-loaded into your family. So we don't need to load that as a shared parameter. It will already schedule. However, we will need to add some other shared parameters. I have already preloaded my shared parameter folder. You need to have a shared parameter folder in order to make shared parameters. I recommend using as few as possible, as shared parameter file can get very confusing if you have over 30 shared parameters. It's good to just think about what you actually need as a shared parameter and what can be a family parameter. A shared parameter can show up in schedules and in tags. If you do not need to schedule or tag that piece of information, it does not need to be a shared parameter. Load classification is one key shared parameter you want to have for all your electrical equipment. Also, you want to think about if your parameter should be type or instance. For the most part, with light fixtures, because we create a new type for each type of fixture, most of the parameters are going to be type parameters. However, things like switch ID 2 and emergency will need to be instance, so they can be changed on an instance basis rather than a type basis. We're going to put emergency under graphics because it has to do with what the graphics shows up on the sheet. And again, this is an instance parameter. Once you have loaded emergency, you'll need EM tag as well. Now again, these are my shared parameters. You can create yours. You may not have the same names, but the general idea is that you'll have an EM tag, and this isn't something that your users will use. It's simply a back of house method for us to allow the tag to say EM after the type. For example, F1 EM when the emergency is clicked. And we're going to put it under other, so it shows at the very bottom of our data here, down here. Now, if you're doing a linear fixture, like, a linear stretch fixture that has, or even not a stretch fixture, anything that is rectangular, you'll want to use fixture depth, length, and width. This allows you to calculate the totals in the end of a project, total linear length of all your fixtures, and have it be schedulable. However, this fixture is going to be round, so we won't be using those. If you intend on creating a fixture that is free, not hosted, and you want to nest that, you can use mounting height. However, we won't be nesting, so we won't be using mounting height this time. Recessed is a good one to have because it allows you to add the checkbox that adds an extra ring to show that it's recessed. This is a type parameter and it controls graphics, so we'll put it under the graphic category. Again, this is a free fixture, and normally recessed, we use face-based. I'm creating this fixture to be able to be used as a lot of types of different things, so I want to keep recessed as an option. Since we're creating a round fixture, we will want to use radius. It's a dimension, it automatically creates that, and it's a type parameter. If we were creating a suspended fixture, we may want to use suspension height. You will always need voltage. It's a type parameter, and we're going to group it under electrical engineering. Now, I haven't been very consistent with where I put voltage. It varies in different families if you put it under electrical lighting, electrical loads, or electrical engineering. It doesn't really affect anything except where your users will go when they click on edit type to find it. Usually people just scroll anyway, so it doesn't really matter where you put it as long as it's logical, and if you can, be consistent. Switch ID 2 is the parameter we use to create light groups, that is, the identification that tells you which fixtures go with which switch. Revit has a switch ID, hence the name switch ID 2, but it only allows you a 1-to-1 ratio between fixtures and switches. And oftentimes, in the modern day, when we have lots of digital switches, this is very limiting. So we use switch ID 2, which is used in schedules, tags, and in both fixture devices and electrical lighting fixtures. Be sure to make sure that this is instance. I've made this mistake several times of forgetting to make this instance, and it's very frustrating for your users because it has to be an instance base. It cannot be a type base because two fixtures of the same type may be in different user groups, so it must be an instance type parameter. I generally put this under text, but you can put it wherever you think is logical. Lastly, we need to make a family type default. This isn't required, but this tends to be our standard. You can see which are instance-based because they have a default in parentheses. This is what will appear in the properties bar in Project World, and these will appear in the edit type window in Project World. You now have yourself a basic template for making a light fixture. If you'd like to save this as, a basis so that you don't have to do this every time, it's kind of a seed for making others. Or you can wait till our next step to save that as your seed, as we'll be going over electrical connector. Normally, you don't add an electrical connector until you make the 3D shape, but if you're creating a file that you want to use as something to save as each time you make a new fixture, you may want to have the electrical connector already set up. Or maybe you would like to make a fixture that actually has no 3D content and just acts like a 3D content. So we will be starting out making a family with an electrical connector and a symbol, and finally making the 3D content at the very end. This concludes part 1. Please see part 2 for the next part in this series.